What's going on, guys? Noobs here. Today, I am so excited to be reviewing Metroid Samus Returns. It just feels so good to be back with a legitimate Metroid game to talk about. It doesn't just feel like it's been forever, it actually has been. If you can believe it, Prime 3 came out in 2007, 10 years ago. And the last 2D Metroid was all the way back with Zero Mission in 2004. Ignoring certain unfortunate deviances with the Metroid franchise since those times, we are finally back. And it feels so good. So as I'm sure everyone knows, this is sort of a reimagining of the old Game Boy Metroid 2. I never played that game, but I don't think there's really much of that original game in this game, aside from the fact that the basic premise is the same, which is 2D Metroid, playing as Samus, hunting 40 Metroids. Oh, by the way, is the plural of Metroid Metroid or Metroids? Something to think about. Anyone who's played another 2D Metroid game is going to feel right at home here. You are playing as Samus alone. Throughout the game, you're finding weapons and abilities that are going to help you access more areas of the game as you travel. The feeling of isolation is there. It's like this kind of creepy music. You're encountering crazier and crazier, more frightening monsters the deeper you go. And it's scary. It feels like Alien, right? That's the whole point of these things. You feel like you're isolated with these just monsters who want to kill you. It feels so good. Samus Returns has a great set of controls, in my opinion. Very smart. It's a 2D game. It's the kind of the side view. And it's hard to screw that up, but still, you really feel the precision. I think you hold down the L button to kind of lock Samus down, and then you aim, which feels great. That's new. And then R to switch into shooting missiles instead of your regular arm cannon. It all feels so good. And then, of course, throughout the game, you unlock more and more abilities. I don't want to get too much into that. It might be a bit spoilery, but also, you know what? If you're familiar with Metroid games, none of it's really going to feel like much of a surprise. Having said that, there are a couple of notable new additions here. One is there's sort of a physical counterattack. You hit the button at the right time, and an enemy coming at you, you kind of bash them away. It's mostly relevant in the early game when you're really just barely staying alive, but even late game, it comes into play with some boss fights. So it's a cool addition. Personally, I don't think I super needed it, but I'm not complaining about it either. And then you also get these abilities throughout the game that use up like an energy source called Aeon. Most of these are kind of standard Metroid-y things for just helping you explore, get further. But one of them is a scan ability, and this is really interesting. It reveals some of the map around you. As well, it'll highlight kind of secret breakable blocks in the room right around you. Now, some people might complain about this. They say you're maybe dumbing down Metroid or something, but I really like this. I appreciate this. It's a way to make a Metroid game a little more accessible. Sometimes it could just be frustrating because you can tell that there's clearly a way through. There's got to be a block somewhere, and you just hit the scan so you don't waste your time bombing everything trying to figure out where it is. So I really appreciate this. Kind of reminds me of like adding the casual mode in the recent Fire Emblem games, where Nintendo's found some clever ways to make some of their most hardcore franchises a little more accessible. But this brings up one downside, really the one complaint I have with this game. The scan ability is making the thing more accessible, but I find the game feels a little unbalanced in its difficulty. I had hoped to wait to do this review after beating the game, but I've actually been hung up on some of the late game bosses. And, I'm playing on just the normal difficulty. I'm not afraid to use the scan ability. I don't mind having an easier time. And, earlier in the game, I was really feeling the pacing. I felt like I was really progressing and getting through it quickly, but I've kind of hit this wall where it's like one after another. It's either a boss fight or a Metroid fight, and they are just brutal, and I'm having to replay them over and over again, and it's really slowed down my progress. So I feel like just the difficulty of the bosses slash mini, I guess, kind of, there are bosses and then there are Metroid battles, which are sort of like mini bosses. Although some of the late game Metroid fights can feel like boss battles, believe me. And just going from one boss fight to Metroid fight to the next, it's slowing me down and it's frustrating me because it's just, to me, the difficulty of the boss fights feels like they're from another difficulty level. Like, I think they should just be one notch below on normal, and maybe where they are should be at the heart, reserved for harder difficulties. Having said that, like, this game is flawless otherwise. Like, that's the one thing I would change. I think some people might feel that some of the Metroid fights might feel a bit repetitive, but I kind of like it. I mean, they aren't there's 40 of them. You can't make each of them a big showpiece boss fight, right? But they're still challenging and exciting, and it's a big deal every time you find a Metroid. It feels good, right? To track one down and then kill it. So I'm not going to complain about that at all. I should mention, though, I was talking about how great the controls are in this game, but they really take full advantage of all the buttons on the 3DS. And, like, there's a lot to manage on there. So if you're in this really intense boss battle, like, that can start cramping your hands. And, like, if you die and have to replay it a few times, like, my hands were getting sore. I would have to take breaks sometimes, which also unfortunately slows me down in the game a bit. So yeah, again, it's just those boss fights that hang me up. Now, as for what this game means for the future of Metroid, well, I really hope it just means more of the same. There was a while there in kind of the early to mid 2000s where I actually felt like we were getting a little bit overrun with Metroid games. Now it's been gone so long, like I hardly, I missed it. I missed it so much. So I'm excited for Prime 4. I really hope we keep getting 2D Metroid games as well. Personally, I would have liked the classic pixel art with this, but you know what? I won't complain. It looks great on 3DS. It's crazy to think how old the 3DS is now, and then we're just getting now another game that just is really up there in the pantheon of that system's amazing library. So that's great to see as well. I mean, we've been so lucky with Nintendo games this year between Breath of the Wild, now this. Later we're getting Mario Odyssey. It's kind of a crazy year to be a Nintendo fan. It's like one of our best years ever, I think. So yeah, that's Samus Returns for you. I cannot recommend this game enough. If you're a fan of older Metroid games, classic Metroid, you have to get this. And even if you're not, you know what? This is probably a great way to jump into it. The scannability makes things a little more accessible. So seriously, cannot recommend this game enough. And let me know, guys, what do you think of Samus Returns? Have you played it? Are you having as much difficulty as I have been with the boss fights? Let me know, do I just suck at games, or is that a fair complaint? Let me know in the comments, and thanks for watching.